Alright everybody, what's going on? It's Alex once again with the EOT News Flash, and welcome to the last set of our Modern Horizons set review for both Limited and Modern Impact. We are onto the green, the gold, the colorless, the artifacts, and the lands. So this could take a minute. As always, we are operating on a 4-point scale. The 1s are the cards you should never play, 2s are your generic filler, your 3s are your more premium spells, removal and creatures and things of that nature, and your 4s are your absolute bombs that will pull you into a color. You open your pack, you open your sealed pool, you find the rare, you find whatever color you want to play, and go for it from there. So, we also have 2 additional scales working off of. We have our Bs, which are your build around me cards, and your S's are your sideboard cards, which you might bring in against a threat that your opponent presents to you that your deck might not normally be able to handle, and that's why you'll leave them in the sideboard, because they're only for those specific instances of interaction there. So, let's not waste any time. Let's get right into it with a card that I'm not entirely surprised to see, but it's just funny that it's showing up, you know, finally here now. We have Ayula, Queen Among Bears. Yes, our legendary bear has arrived. It's actually a bear and not that Goreclaw nonsense from M19. Whatever. So Ayula, Queen Among Bears is a 1 and a green legendary bear, rare, 2/2, and reads, whenever another bear enters the battlefield under your control, choose one, put 2+1/+1 counters on target bear, and or target bear you control fights. Is it fights? Yes, fights target creature you don't control. So, EDH players rejoice. The only downside to this is that there's actually only 2 bears that actually, you know, cards that care about bears, Mother Bear, and then Ayula's Influence in this set that actually make bears. But you can rely on the changelings in this set, and there's a decent number of them that you could possibly put into a green deck. There is only 1 green changeling, but a good number of white changelings that you could possibly do with this. Maybe even green-black, I'm not sure. But yeah, you know, Ayula's really powerful, you know, for a 2-drop, you know, to just make the creatures that you play just that much bigger each time. It's quite powerful, and the fight mechanic can actually do some real work there. So Ayula gets a 2.25 for me. Next up, we have her Influence. Green, 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 enchantment at rare. Discard a land card and create a 2/2 green bear creature token. So this is an absolute build around me because you need to have a deck that can really take advantage of discarding excess lands and at the same time not screwing yourself with the lands you actually needed to draw. So the hardest part about this card is that triple green. But you know, once you do have it online and you've got, let's say, 18 or so lands in your deck, I do see some potential for this one, and there are enough cards in this set that care about cards being in the graveyard, or land cards that is, that I can actually see this being quite powerful if you get it all to come together correctly. So pretty powerful, but just a build around for me. Next up, we have Bellowing Elk. 3 and a green creature elk at common, 4/2 that reads, as long as you had another creature enter the battlefield under your control this turn, Bellowing Elk has trample and indestructible. So without that clause, this card is trash. It's a solid 2 for me because of the clause and that stupid creature fault. Those are Channel Fireball's words, not mine, but I'm rolling with it. Once you have that online, be it, you know, with, you know, just naturally playing creatures each turn, or, you know, making instant speed creatures maybe off of Ayula's Influence somehow, kind of a neat synergy right there. This becomes quite powerful, and despite having a relatively low toughness, the indestructibility and trample pair makes this a potent beater, but you do need to have a, you know, just a constant stream of creatures to take advantage of it completely. And next up, we have the Collector Oof. This green guy with the weird beard. 1 and a green for a rare 2/2. Not gonna read it. It's a creature though. Activated abilities of artifacts can't be activated. In Limited, this is just a bear. You know, I've already said several times that there just aren't enough artifacts in this set to actually make this be a relevant line of text on there, so it's just a 2/2 for 2. Now, in Modern, however, this gets pretty nuts because all of a sudden you have a great target for your Chords of Calling, your collected companies, your just green white value decks will just love playing this Kiki Chord decks. You know, it's a really solid collector for your collected companies. Yeah, okay, I'm done. That's enough of that bad joke. Alright, moving right along to Conifer Worm. This is a 4 and a green snow creature worm, an uncommon 4/4 that has trample and reads 3 and a green. Conifer Worm gets +X until the end of turn, where X is the number of snow permanents that you control. Now, this is a massive beater, even without that, all that additional snow support. We're looking at just, a 5-mana 4/4 with trample, which is, completely playable. But if you do have a decent number of snow permanents, of which there are a lot, well, a lot relatively in green here, I could see this thing being, not terrible, but it's not going to be like, the all-star of your deck. But I can see this being quite a powerful card here. I gave the Conifer Worm here a 1.75. And next up, we have got Crashing Footfalls. This is weird because it has no mana cost, but we'll explain this. So this was one of the few cards in this set that has Suspend, and so what you do instead of actually paying a mana cost, you pay its Suspend cost. So Suspend 4, pay a green. Rather than cast this card from your hand, pay a green and exile with 4 time counters on it at the beginning of each upkeep or your upkeep. Remove a time counter. When the last is removed, cast it without paying its mana cost. So this used to be a really sort of trick thing in older formats where you had things like Ancestral Vision, Greater Garganon. Time Spiral was where this mechanic came from, and it's a pretty cool mechanic because it lets you put an investment up front and then forget about it until it actually does something. So the effect that we get here is that we get 2 4/4 green Rhino creature tokens with trample, and that's actually pretty powerful here. The only downside is that you have to wait for it for a number of turns, so obviously hitting this on turn 1, going Forest, tap, Suspend, Crashing Footfalls, that's really powerful here, but doing it on any turn, I would say like beyond turn 4, and it's suspect just how much value you're going to get out of this. It's a lot of power across 2 bodies, but depending on what point you draw this in the game, it might just be too little too late. But that being said, it's a solid 2 for me. Next up, we've got Deep Forest Hermit. 3 green is an elf druid at rare. It's a 1/1 that has Vanishing. So Vanishing is always followed by a number, and in this case it's 3, so Vanishing 3. This creature enters the battlefield with 3 time counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a time counter, much like Suspend, and when the last one is removed, you sacrifice it instead. So lots of time counter manipulation in this set that you can take advantage of. When it enters the battlefield, create 4 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens, and squirrels you control get +1/+1. Now the card this is harkening back to, I believe, is Deranged Hermit, who had the exact same thing here, except it had an echo cost you had to pay instead of Vanishing. Still a very powerful card here as well. I give it a solid 3, and it's neat that we're getting to take advantage of tribal types with the changelings in this set, because that squirrel type line applies to them as well. It's just a real shame that you can't manipulate those counters and add on more counters to it to make its cycle around even longer. But I would imagine having 3 turns of this thing being on the board with a giant army of squirrels and changelings might just be enough to get the game done. So solid 3 for me. Next up, we have Elvish Fury, a single green instant at common with buyback 4. So as you cast the spell, you may pay an additional 4 generic mana, and if you do, return it to your hand as it resolved. And the creature that you target gets +2/+2 until the end of turn. This is a solid combat trick. We just saw that Giant Growth got reprinted in War of the Spark that didn't actually see any play because it's not the format for that card. I suspect that this might be a little bit more relevant in this set, especially with the buyback. Being able to go in the late game and have a pump spell that actually has a little bit of flexibility and reach into the late game is nothing to scoff at. So it's a 1.75 for me, but it's still just pretty underwhelming if you ask me. Next up, we've got the Excavating Anurid. I guess Anurid is a frog of sorts. There's your science lesson for today. 4 and a green Frog Beast, common 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a land, and if you do, draw a card. And it also has Threshold. As long as there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard, activating Threshold. Excavating Anurid gets +1/+1 and has Vigilance. So that's a pretty powerful common here. I do like this guy quite a bit. It's a solid beater, and your average limited deck will likely have lands to support the land sack here. So if you play this in the later turns, I'll be happy to sacrifice a land. Once you've got 6 or 7 lands in play, you're never really, needing that many more to, win a game with. And Threshold is also very easy to turn on in Limited. Things are always dying, spells are always resolving. Your graveyard is going to have a decent number of spells in it, and Threshold will more than likely be active on this guy. So solid 2 for me. Next up, we've got Force of Vigor. This is our last of the Force cycle here. 2 green instant at rare. If it's not your turn, you may exile a green card from your hand rather than paying this card's mana cost. Destroy up to 2 artifacts and or enchantments. Now, I've been getting to sound like a broken record on this review because once again, there just are not enough relevant targets in this set. And the ones that are like mythic rares that you just really wouldn't need to worry about. And if they do show up, and if you've got this in your pool, by all means sideboard this in. But beyond that, it's pretty underwhelming as far as that goes. Modern applications are a little bit more various because you have decks like Bloom Type be able to make advantage of this by blowing up Blood Moons to turn their lands back on. Dredge might be able to take advantage of this as well by blowing up things like Relic of Progenitus, Rest in Peace. So there's some decent applications to this card in Limits in Modern. Whether it's better than playing something like an Ancient Grudge or a Naturalize or a Nature's Claim, I'm suspect at best, but it's a cool card and probably has a lot of play to it in other formats. Yeah. Moving right along, we've got Frostwalla, a little throwback to one of my favorite green cards of all time, Rootwalla. 2 and a green gets you a lizard at common through 2/2, and you can pay a snow mana, so invading color, just snow mana, and it gets +2/+2 until the end of turn. Activate this ability only once per turn. You're going to need the snow mana to make this little guy relevant here. 3 mana 2/2s are always playable Limited, but very underwhelming, and without that snow mana activation, he is just a generic vanilla creature, and without that, he's pretty boring. Solid 1.5. Next up, we've got Genesis. 4 and a green for an incarnation. How many incarnations are in Magic, I wonder? Probably less than 15, if I had to guess. This is a rare 4/4 that reads, at the beginning of your upkeep, if Genesis is in your graveyard, you may pay 2 and a green, and if you do, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Genesis bringing value untold by anybody. This card is ridiculously powerful. Late into the game, if you've lost a good spell, maybe it's removal or a creature, and you've got Genesis in there, I will let Genesis die. I will put Genesis in harm's way to initiate this engine, because holy cow, when this thing starts going and you're getting back your best removal, your creatures, super powerful. I gave Genesis here a 3. Very difficult card to beat once the engine gets going. Very, very cool card. And a good reprint too. I've been needing one for my EDH decks. Next up, we've got Glacial Revelation. 2 and a green for a sorcery at uncommon. Reveals the top 6 cards of your library. You may put any number of snow permanent cards from among them into your hand, and the rest go into your graveyard. Now, I'm sure that Frank Karsten over on Channel Fireball has already crunched the numbers on like what your average number of snow permanents you need in a deck to make this thing be relevant. I did no such thing, and I'm not very good at doing such things either, so I'm going to leave it up to them. I gave this a solid B, though, as a nice little way out. You need a bunch to build around it, and beyond that, I mean, it's drawing you cards at least, which is kind of good. And there's a little bit, I guess there's some impact putting things in the graveyard too. Oh, you just play this with no snow permanents in the deck and just put everything in the graveyard. Yeah, Threshold, simple. Oh, this just turns on Threshold by itself. Yeah, you. There you go, solved it. Moving on. To Hex Drinker, a single green creature snake mythic rare with the level up mechanic. We haven't seen this in a very long time, since original Zendikar, if I'm not mistaken. Level up reads, you pay, all level up cards are different. So this one is, you just need 1 generic mana to level it up each time. And it starts out its life as a 2/1, and you can pay 1 generic mana or any mana to level it up. And each level, it gets different abilities. So levels 3 through 7, it's protection from instants, and as a 4/4. Level 8 and above, protection from everything, and it's also a 6/6. So This card's pretty nuts. I would not risk playing this on turn 1 when there is, a decent amount of removal that can just pop this thing off very quickly, Now, obviously, if you can play this in the mid to late game where you have the mana to sink into it, I would happily play this on turn 4 and immediately level it up 3 times and just have it be protected from those instants. And then from there, just whatever turn I can, level it up when you can, and just keep the pressure going until this thing gets to its ultimate level and just, ends the game by itself. Very, very powerful card, but like I said, you do need the time to sink the mana into it to make it become relevant. Solid 2.5 for me. Next up, we've got Krosan Tusker, another cool reprint that I'm surprised is not modern legal, but up until now. So this is a 5 green boar beast at common. It's a 6/5 that reads with cycling 2 and a green, so you would pay that mana cost, discard this card, and draw a new card. And when you cycle Krosan Tusker, you may search your library for a basic land card, reveal that card, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Do this before you draw. Now this is, I believe, is most reminiscent, if you've been playing Magic more recently, Shefet Monitor from Amonkhet, which did basically the exact same thing, but I think it put the land into play. Fact check me on that one, ladies and gentlemen. But yeah, Krosan Tusker is a really powerful card here. There's a ton of utility on it. I am suspect on how often you'll actually pay the mana cost to put this into play, because it's just a big dumb beater. More than likely, I'll often be cycling this thing and getting out a splash land if I have that splash in my deck. But into the late game, if I draw it late and I need a beater, it's serviceable. It's a 2.25 for me. Next up, we've got Llanowar Tribe. 3 Llanowar Elves. Seriously. This card, when they printed this, I just about had a fit at my desk. It is green for an Elf Druid at uncommon. That's a 3/3 and adds green to your mana pool. It does exactly, I love when Magic cards do exactly as they are advertised. What do 3 Llanowar Elves do? They make 3 mana, of course. It's great. It's great. And it's also nice that I could not pinpoint the exact versions of Llanowar Elf that this art is from, but it's basically like 3 different Llanowar Elves from the past of the history of Magic that are now sort of like coming together as this tribe. Very, very cool. Very, very flavorful. Yeah, it's like Ice Age, the Phyrexian Invasion, Rift Era. So long as we draw a breath, we will ensure such disasters never threaten our world again, and ramp things out very quickly. Rambling aside, this card is actually pretty powerful here. You do need to build around this one simply because that triple green, much like Ayula's Influence, is so hard to hit on curve. But if you do, the acceleration is huge on this, and it's definitely a powerful card. It's a solid 2, and it's only held back by that mana cost, nothing else. Next up, we've got, Mommy Bear, or Mother Bear, yeah. We'll just call it Mommy Bear, there we go. This is a 1 and a green 2/2, as always, bear at common. You can pay 3 and a green and exile Mother Bear from your graveyard and create 2/2 green bear creature tokens. Active its ability only at any time you can cast a sorcery. That's adorable. And the art is just like, in the background, little bears. So cute. Yeah, Mother Bear is awesome. It's clearly the best bear because Mama's always the best. Mother knows best. This card is quite powerful, even at its just baseline stats. 2 mana 2/2s are always good, but having this upside of making additional bears is just great. If you have this with Ayula herself, this gets kind of out of control. And the only downside to this card is you can activate it only at sorcery speed. I would imagine in testing, this thing was at instant speed at some point, and they just found that instant speed Bear Assault was just too good. Maybe not, I don't know. Solid 2.25 for me, though. Very powerful card. Next up, we've got the Murasa Behemoth. 4 green beast at common. It's a 5/5, and whenever, as long as there is a land in your graveyard, it's a +3/+3, and it also has trample to boot. This card is pretty nutty, actually. And there's lots of ways in green to get those lands into your graveyard, be it cycling or sacrificing, as we'll see on a card here in just a minute. So I like this card quite a bit. 6 mana for 8 power is quite huge. And if you need a good top-end finisher in your deck, I can see this being a pretty decent one at that. So I gave the Behemoth here, it's a 2.25 for me. Next up, we have got the Nantuko Cultivator. It's a 3 and a green insect druid at uncommon 2/2 that reads, as it enters the battlefield, you may discard any number of land cards and put that many +1/+1 counters on Nantuko Cultivator, and then draw that many cards. This is a very powerful way to filter out excess lands into the late game. You know, and typically when you're playing limited, you play your lands as you draw them. But you know, this is a good lesson in a card here, essentially, that tells you don't always need to do that. Hold your lands, bluff removal spells, you know, tricks and things of that nature. So that your opponent has to think that you're playing around something. And if they bite, you know, they bite. But this is a really powerful card, like I said, to be able to pitch that many cards. You know, even 1 or 2 is just, you know, it's solid to get that value off of it. And drawing cards in green is something that's always attached to usually an effect of a creature as well. And I think this is a really good example of that. It's a solid 2.5 for me. Very cool, very powerful. And next up, we have got a legacy staple from about, 2010. Oh, how times have changed. Nimble Mongoose here is a single green mongoose at common. It's a 1/1 that has Shroud, so it cannot be the target of spells or abilities. Note that doesn't say that your opponent controls. This is old school Shroud that you can't target either, unlike Hexproof. And it has Threshold, and it gets +2/+2 as long as there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard. 1 mana 3/3s are not terribly exciting in Limited, especially when they take a good amount of time to actually turn on. You're not going to be like just going ham with these things like you would in Legacy in those old Temur Delver decks that played this and Tarmogoyfs and Delver of Secrets. Now this would be really cool in Modern if it were to be able to see play alongside, again, Delver of Secrets, Tarmogoyfs, maybe the Icefang Coddle in some sort of like Sultai or Temur Delver tempo list. Nimble Mongoose is powerful, no doubt about it, but it definitely needs a lot of support, and I'm curious and cautiously optimistic that it might be possible. Not having things like Daze and Wasteland and Force of Will to really back this card up is kind of a bummer, but it may get there, and art is just... it's too much. Next up, we have Regrowth. 1 and a green sorcery at uncommon that reads, return target card from your graveyard to your hand. Full stop. Very powerful. Yeah, your best thing. Now you have it again. 2.5. Moving on. We've got Rime Tender. 1 and a green snow creature, human druid, common 2/2. You can tap it to untap target snow permanent. Another, so you just can't like tap this to untap itself indefinitely. That would be silly. This card is another build around me, unfortunately, and another good reason for you to not take out the snow lands in your drafts. You do need those common lands to make the draft actually function as it should, because snow archetype is very real in this format here. And that being said, you know, I still think this is a pretty easy build around me. You know, at least you can untap maybe some of your other snow creatures. But I do think you want this, obviously, to untap snow lands to get some sort of a ramp effect out of it. Being a bear itself is pretty good here. So this is a build around me card. I wouldn't just slam it into any deck because I do want it to have some relevant text on it. So it's a build around me, but you know, once you have it in the deck, it's probably like a solid 2 at that. Next up, we have got the Saddled Rime Stag. This is a 1 and a green snow creature, elk. Hey, look at that, combos with Rime Tender. Uncommon 2/2, and it has +2/+2 as long as you had another creature in the battlefield under your control this turn. So more creature fall. Again, 2 mana 2/2s are always playable limited, and this one gets a little bit better with creatures always entering the battlefield. So it's good. It's solid 2.25 because, you know, you're in green and white, you're always playing creatures, so it's good. Next up, we have Savage Swipe. It is a single green sorcery at common. Target creature gets +2/+2 until the end of turn if its power is 2, and then it fights a target creature you don't control. So I have to give this a 2 on principle. I have to. It's actually quite a powerful card, you know, in the right instances. There are a surprising number. I mean, just looking at the screen right now, I can see 5 2/2s in green. So you will have relevant targets for this, and if you've got any, Anthem effects going on, you might have even more if you have a bunch of X1s or 1/1s in play. Yeah, this is a powerful card, no doubt. Fighting is always good, and if you can, make it be a 4/4 at the same time, or a 4/3, or whatever it's going to be, the power boost is definitely relevant as well, and you get to attack with it. Pretty good stuff here, but I give it a 2 on principle, just because I had to. Next up, we've got Scale Up. This is a single green sorcery at uncommon that reads, until the end of turn, target creature you control becomes a green worm with base power and toughness 6/4, and you can overload it by paying 4 green, and when you do that, you replace, you basically target all creatures that you control. So this is a really, really big swing if you go for it. Unfortunately, as a one-time shot, you better make sure it's worth it, especially when you're overloading. You're either ending the game or putting your opponent in such a position where they have to block and just lose their entire board, and at that, it's pretty good at doing that. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this, to be completely honest. It's like big overrun effects like this are always good in Limited, but without some sort of additional, keyword like trample or vigilance, this becomes far less exciting. So this might be better than I'm giving it credit for, but for the time being, I'm just going to give it a 1.5. Now in Modern, this is already seeing some play in Infect, because this actually enables turn 2 kills in that format, and that's terrifying. So moving on. We've got Spore Frog, a little Hypnotoad analog here. A single green creature frog at common. You can sacrifice the Spore Frog and prevent all combat damage that will be dealt this turn. Yep. A fog that can attack is only slightly better than an actual fog. So, hard pass here. No modern play, but Muldrotha EDH decks apparently love this guy a lot because they can play it out of the Regrowth with Muldrotha in play. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Next up, we've got Spring Bloom Druid, and this is a card that when I read, I just about lost it, because this is a deceptively powerful Magic card. 2 and a green, Elf Druid at common. It's a 1/1 that reads, when it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a land, and if you do, search your library for up to 2 basic lands, put them on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. So this is another really great enabler for the green-red deck that wants lands in the graveyard, or Skull Guardian is best friends with the Druid here. And the fact that it's getting any 2 basics, not of a specific color, is also huge. So if you do have a bit of a splash going on, you can go get the lands that go with that. So this is a very powerful card in the deck that wants to do that, and it's one of the few ways in this format that's going to enable 3+ with a big asterisk, because I don't think you want to go that deep, 3-color decks in some cases. Very, very powerful card here. Like it a lot. Next up, we have Squirrel Nest. 1 green aura at uncommon. Enchants the land, and that land has tapped. Create a 1/1 green squirrel creature token. Yeah. This is some wild stuff here. And actually, hold on. I need to check something. Is 1 second. Let's see here. Intruder Alarm Modern, because if this is legal, and I believe that it is, you got a thing here. Let's see. Intruder Alarm was printed. Yep, it's legal. Okay, yep. So it's a 2.5 for limited play. Just because it's an endless stream of creatures. This could probably take the game completely over if it's left unchecked. And when you put it into Modern, you play it with Intruder Alarm, and you create basically an infinite number of squirrels. So that's fun. Yeah. All right, moving on. Wait, does it? I don't think it actually does what I'm thinking it does. Hold on here. Create whenever a creature. Untap all creatures. Okay, so maybe. Oh, so you put this on like Dryad Arbor then. Okay, that's fine. It still works. Yeah, Dryad Arbor, put this on it. Intruder Alarm, tap Dryad Arbor to make a squirrel, untaps the Dryad Arbor because it's a land. Yeah, infinite. Okay, there we go. Solved it. Moving on. Breaking Modern over here, guys. That's why you came to this. The content you guys came for. Next up, we've got Tempered Sliver. 2 and a green sliver uncommon that reads, sliver creatures you control have whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, but a +1/+1 counter on it. It is a 2/2. Now, it's funny that they put slivers in all 5 color, well, all but blue actually. And they put the better ones not in red and white. At least I think they put the better ones in red and white. And to that point, a majority of the slivers in this set are red and white. But if you pair this with the few that are actually in green and a few that are in white and some changelings, you do have a very powerful engine right here. As long as you're dealing damage to players, you're going to make counters very, very quickly. And this thing left unchecked could end the game very, very fast. 2.5. Next up, we've got Tornado. I am completely blown away that they haven't made that joke yet. Tornado. Like, this cannot be the first time this has happened. I just refuse to believe that. 2 and a green instant at common, destroys target creature with flying, and it cycles for 1 and a green. Typically, plummet effects, I'm, remiss to put in the sideboard. But because this has cycling, I'm happy to put this in just about any green deck if I'm scrapping for a 23rd playable. This might just make it a majority of the time because there are a relevant number of flyers and limited that you need to take care of. And having some flexibility to cycle this away when you don't need it, very good stuff here. So it's a 1.75 for me. I like a good flexible combat spell like this, or removal spell like this. Next up, we've got Tree Folk Umbra. It is an enchantment aura at common. It enchants a creature. An enchanted creature gets +0/+2 and assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. So this is the old Doran the Siege Tower trick here. And it also has totem armor. If enchanted creature would be destroyed, instead remove all damage from it and destroy this aura. It's weird that it's removing all damage. Like, that's some very old school terminology right there. That's a bit like damage on the stack. But yeah, it could just be easier to say prevent that damage and destroy this aura instead. But whatever, semantics aside. This is a really unexciting card. I've never been a fan of auras in limited for the most part. It's certainly playable. It's a good way to force out, multiple combats from your opponent or at least an extra removal spell, but it's a 1.75 for me. It's pretty underwhelming filler. And next up, we have the Tree Top Ambusher. 1 and a green Elf Berserker at common. It's a 2/1 with a dash. Remember the dash, guys? You pay 1 and a green, and you may cast this spell for its dash cost, and if you do, it gains haste, and it's returned from the battlefield to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. So it's basically just, one-time attack for a very cheap cost. And whenever it attacks, target creature you control gets +1/+1 until the end of turn. Now, this is actually, when I first read this, I was pretty underwhelmed. But then I remembered that all these green creatures want creatures entering the battlefield each turn. And this is a great enabler for that. So I gave it only a 1.5 just because of how weak it is. But if you do find yourself in that green-white creature fall deck, this is actually a pretty potent piece of that, and so it's a good curve filler at that, and can make some pretty powerful plays. With the board state is in your favor to do that. Like with the elk, and we'll see a gold creature here in a little bit that actually takes a huge advantage of creatures entering the battlefield. Next up, we have got Trumpeting Heard. This is a 2 green sorcery at common, creates a 3/3 green elephant creature token and rebounds. So as you cast a spell from your hand, exile it as it resolves at the beginning of your next upkeep. You may cast this card from exile without paying its mana cost. I like a good rebound spell. Consuming Vapor is probably one of my favorites, actually. Old Rise of the Eldrazi rare, if you're familiar with it. This is actually a pretty powerful card here, all told. 4 mana for 6 power across 2 bodies is pretty solid. And again, this does pair nicely with those creatures who do need other creatures entering the battlefield at a consistent rate. So this is 2 turns of that for a relatively small investment. And again, it's a lot of power for just a very small investment at that. So this is a solid 2 for me, and obviously it does get better when you do have a deck that wants to take advantage of creatures entering the battlefield. Creature Fall. I will never let that go. Never let that go. Next up, we've got the Twin Silk Spider. This is a 2 and a green creature spider at common. It's a 1/2 with reach. And when Twin Silk Spider enters the battlefield, create a 1/2 green spider creature token with reach. These spiders have always been good. Like, it's like Giant Spider was like the OG of this. And they've retired Giant Spider, you know, he's done this good work. And they just keep making more variations of the spider, you know. Monstrous Spider was great. There was one in Modern Masters 2 that was a 2/4 that died and replaced itself. Like, these spiders are always really freaking annoying because I like playing decks that are weak to these spiders. So I've had to, you know, come to the dark side and play with spiders. Aside, this is a great foil against the Battle Screech decks. Like I said, they've always been good in Limited. It's interesting, I have to go back and look, because a lot of the blue flyers, this does not check very well. The white flyers, however, the spider will eat all day long. So keep that in mind when you're playing Limited. If you're in the green deck, hope your opponent doesn't have more blue flyers than white flyers. You're going to be in for a bad time. Next up, we've got Unbound Flourishing. 2 and a green for an enchantment at Mythic Rare. Must do something really powerful. Whenever you cast a permanent spell with a mana cost that contains X, double the value of X. Interesting. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell or activate an ability that, if that spell's mana cost or that ability's activation cost contains X, copy that spell or ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. Now, there is only one card in this set that has X in its mana cost, and it's a rare. We'll get to it in a little bit here. Powerful card, no doubt, but I just don't think it's worth it. This is a 0. Like, this is completely unplayable. There's absolutely zero reason to put this in your limited pool. EDH players, go nuts. You know what to do with this. The art is very, very indicative of that. So, moving along to Wall of Blossoms, another card that I'm surprised is not modern legal up until now. Blows my mind. 1 and a green, uncommon, 0/4 plant Wall of Defender that reads, whenever Wall of Blossoms in a battlefield, draw a card. I love Wall of Blossoms. I love Wall of Omens. I love 0/4s that draw cards when they ETB. Creature Fall. Yeah, this is a great blocker as always. It's nice that, you know, it will survive early combat, allow you to set up for later turns, and cycling itself, you know, as it enters the battlefield is always powerful here. Solid 2, solid role player in the format. Next up we have Weather the Storm. Damn it, I just got the joke. Oh. Oh man, 1 and a green, instant, common, gain 3 life with Storm. Damn it. But it got me. Okay, yeah, so Storm reads, whenever you cast a spell, copy it for each spell, cast it before this turn. God, I'm so mad at myself for not catching that the first time I read this. Anyway, so, this is a sideboard card, plain and simple. I can't really imagine a scenario where this life gain is able to get you out of some horrible situation. Sideboard at best, maybe there is, you know, against like the blue-red deck that wants to like fire off a bunch of spells and draw a bunch of cards all in one turn. This might be relevant for it, but I'm not super enthused to play this. Modern implications, actually, now that I'm really thinking about this, this is a great foil against blue-red Storm. You know, when they go for that Grape Shot kill, it's not going to be enough anymore. Like, this is 3 times the damage I can output with that, you know, realistically. Yeah, pretty cool stuff here. You know, if I'm storming off, though, I better be killing my opponent, and this is just delaying the inevitable in most cases for Limited, so modern only, and God, I'm still so mad that I missed the joke. Good job, Wizards. I'll give you 1. There we go. Next up, we have the Web Weaver Changeling. 3 green, creature shapeshifter, uncommon, 3/5. It's the only green shapeshifter. Changeling has every creature type, has reach, and as it enters the battlefield, if there are 3 or more creature cards in your graveyard, you gain 5 life. Nice, yeah. The stats are pretty ridiculous here. The monstrous spider from Ravnica Allegiance, the 5-mana 3/5 green one with reach, was quite a potent threat in that format. And this one is all the better because of the changeling ability here. The ETB triggers, it is what it is. If you can get it, awesome. I wouldn't, go out of my way to wait to play this until I could gain the 5 life. You probably lost more than 5 at that point anyway. So I wouldn't go that far out of my way to do that. But this is a very powerful card here. It's a 2.25 for me. Very, very powerful. Next up, we've got Winding Way, our last green card here. 1 in a green sorcery at common. Choose creature or land. Reveal the top 4 cards of your library. Put all the cards of the chosen type revealed this way into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. This is a weird card here. Like, this seems more constructed applications than limited. I suspect you'll often name creature to dump the lands from it into your graveyard for the cards that do want that. This is definitely a cool card and a very good support card for the decks that want to pull that trick. But I'm not super sure about it on its face. Thankfully in most limited decks, especially that are in green, you won't have a high number of non-creature spells that are going to be hit by this and go into your graveyard on accident here. So, and only hitting 4 is pretty underwhelming too. So I give it a B. It's built around me. Most green decks will not want this, but the ones that do will probably be able to take pretty solid advantage of this. All right. That's our green cards. Let's jump into multicolor. Let's get to the fun stuff, people. We've got an abominable tree folk to get started on. 2 green-blue snow creature tree folk, uncommon, star for that power toughness, has trample, and its power and toughness are equal to the number of snow permanents you control by itself. It's a 1/1 and goes up from there. And as it enters the battlefield, tap target creature opponent controls. That creature does not untap during its controller's next untap step. A very powerful ability, as always, and limited. And you're going to want every single snow permanent you can get to make the cost worth it. I don't think 4 mana for a 1/1 with trample is... it's not good. It's just not good. This is a solid build around me, though. Unfortunately, most of the snow cards are build arounds because you do need that, additional support from the rest of your deck to pull it off. It's so unlike any other archetype that we've ever looked at in Limited, as far as I'm concerned. If it's playable, it's going to be great. And when it's not, it's going to be really hard because you've probably spent a lot of time investing your picks into these snow cards and never really getting the full payoff for it. And that's really unfortunate that there isn't a good, awesome snow payoff. There's no snow rare that just puts the deck all over the top. Merit-Lage's Slumber might be the one, but it's still pretty suspect here. Anyway, we have Cloud Shredder Sliver, red-white rare sliver, 1/1 that reads: Sliver creatures you control have flying and haste. Dear God, this is terrifying. In the red-white aggressive deck that is going to be mostly comprised of other slivers and changelings, this is terrifying, Kill on sight. There's a couple of slivers we'll talk about here in a minute that just are kill on sight for this limited format, and this is one of them. And if there is a modern version of slivers that need some more aggression, bang, right here. Super powerful card right here. Solid 3 for me in this limited format. Thank God it's only a 1/1. Next up, we've got Collected Conjuring. 2 blue-red for a rare sorcery. I hate when Wizards does this. It's come on. You gave green one of the best cards of all time in Collected Company for modern and standard, and then you do this to the Spell Slingers? Come on. Exile the top 6 cards of your library. You may cast up to 2 sorcery cards at converted mana costs, 3 or less from among them, without paying their mana costs, and put the exiled cards not cast this way on the bottom of your library in a random order. Why can't this be at instant speed? I don't understand. Is it that scary? Maybe it is. I don't know. You're going to need an excess of spells to pull this off. And even if you do, the likelihood that you're going to find the ones you need in your top 6 are so unlikely. So leave this to Modern where it might do something. I honestly don't think it's all that good there either. This is a 0 and a build around me, but even when you do build around it, it's just a 0. Very underwhelming card. Next up, we have got Ella Domri's Call. It's a green and a white, instant at rare. Search your library for a creature card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. Tutors are always good in Limited. And if you're in a green-white deck, specifically that Creature Fall deck, Creature Fall! Damn it! You will have a very good target for this, most likely. It's really cool to see this coming into Modern. Obviously, your green-white value town decks, Kiki Chord, Collective Company decks will be wanting to play this. This is a very cool card, and it's very neat to see this finally come into Modern. And I love the contrast of this old art compared to the new frame. It's very, very. It's neat. There's a very cool sort of antique vibe to this, and I don't know if that's is intentional by the artist here, Kev Walker. Love this art. Next up, we have got Etchings of the Chosen. 1 white-black enchantment uncommon. As it enters battlefield, you choose a creature type, and creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1. You can pay 1 and sacrifice a creature of the chosen type, and target creature you control gains indestructible until the end of turn. That is a lot of words to say. Not doing a whole lot, most likely. You're going to need a tribe to attach to this, obviously. If you're in black-white, you have changelings. So at that point, it's going to be one of your, ancillary tribes. Maybe it's the ninjas you have, and they're, the warriors or something that you have in your deck. So hopefully you do have those changelings to go with this. I don't know if the sec outlet's going to be relevant enough to do anything, but it will protect those key creatures, so this does have a lot of power to it. It is a very build-around-esque card, but I do think that once you have it in a deck that wants this, you're going to have a very powerful card in your hand, and that's why I gave it a 2.5. Next up, we have got one of the coolest cards, full stop, in this set, in Fallen Shinobi. 3 blue-black for a creature zombie ninja! Is that cooler than a vampire ninja? I think so. This is a rare 5/4 with ninjutsu for 2 blue-black. You may return an unblocked attacker you control to hand. Put this card on the battlefield tapped and attacking. Very cool. And whenever Fallen Shinobi deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top 2 cards of their library, and until the end of turn, you may play those cards without paying their mana costs. Wow. This gives you 100% reason to block anything from if your opponent is on blue-black and they attack you. I hope you have attackers or you have blockers for this, because if they have this, one hit could easily spiral an entire game out of control, full stop. It's unreal what this card can do. This thing is so neat. 3.25 for me. This is an awesome card, and yeah, zombie ninjas, awesome. Next up, we have the First Sliver. For white, a blue, a black, a red, and a green, you get a legendary creature, Sliver, mythic rare, 7/7, must be good. Cascade, when you cast the spell, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card that costs less. You may cast it without paying its mana cost, put the exiled cards in the bottom of your library in a random order, and then Sliver spells, you have Cascade. Now, this is a powerful card. This is a very powerful card. I will not lie about that. Unfortunately, there is... I'm not going to say no way. There is a high probability, like 95+%, that you will never cast this in Limited. If you open it, congratulations. You made about, $15 or so. Take it. Put it under your packs and just forget about it and start your draft on pick 2 of pack 1. Unless you have Morophon, there really is no way to cast this thing reliably. And even if you do, just don't. It's a flat out 0. Flat out 0. I can't even get a build around me. It's that bad. It's that hard to cast. Whatever. Next up, we have the Good Fortune Unicorn. This is a 1 green white uncommon 2/2 unicorn that reads, whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. Creature Fall! Yeah, this card's really good. It's a 2.5 for me. This card's really powerful. Very, very good stuff. Next up, we've got a card that I was utterly bewildered by when I first saw it, because it really just kind of breaks all the rules of what I consider a modern Magic card to be. But this is 2019. Like, we're progressing. This is what Magic looks like right now, guys. Hogak, Arisen Necropolis is a 5 hybrid green-black legendary creature avatar, rare. It's an 8/8 that you cannot spend mana to cast the spell. But it does have Convoke and Delve, so you can tap your creatures to help cast the spell. So whenever you tap a creature, it's going to either generate 1 generic mana or 1 color of that creature's identity. So if you tap a green creature, it makes a green mana for Hogak here. And by delving, you can remove cards from your graveyard, and each card that you exile from your graveyard pays for 1 generic mana. You can also cast Hogak, Arisen Necropolis, from your graveyard. And it has trample, because why not? Why not? Like, it's... This card is so weird. Now, to its playability, this is a solid 2.5 with a big build around me attached to that. Putting this in the graveyard and casting it from your graveyard is all fine and good. But there is definitely an upper limit to how many times that you can cast Hogak in a game. There's a limit to how much you can delve. But if you have enough creatures in play, you can probably skirt that cost by quite a bit and get this guy out pretty often. And potentially relatively early as well. But whenever you do cast it, it's probably going to be game ending, because this thing is so big. And if you do have the ability to get this thing out early, you can just go ham with Hogak here. Card is really gross. And there's things like the Revelation, Frozen Revelation card. There's cards that put things just into the graveyard, and if you just name the right type with a Winding Path or the Revelation card that looks for snow permanents, there's a possibility of you just firing those cards off, and then like slamming us on turn 4 somehow. Like, it's doable. This is a very powerful card here, and it's already ruined Modern. This card was like pre-ordering for like $5, and now it's up like 30, I think. Just because it's really revitalized the Dredgevine archetype, combining with like Vengevines and Bloodghasts and Cryptid Dementia, Altered Dementia. It's in this set now to just make a really powerful deck, and probably needs some corrective action at some point. This card is gross. Next up, we have Icefang Quatl. I don't know how to say that. Blue-green for a snow creature snake at rare. It's a 1/1 with flash and flying. As an infidel field, you draw a card, and it has Death Touch as long as you control at least 3 other snow permanents. Pretty cool. Obviously, this is good even without that clause. This is so close to Baleful Strix. I would have just loved to have seen Strix reprinted in this set, but whatever. I can't get what I want ever, apparently. This card is still very, very powerful. It's a very good reason to, take as many snow permanents as you can, be it lands or other creatures. It's a solid 2.5 for me. And in Modern, there's already some talk about putting this into some kind of a Sultai, Steamer, Snow, Tempo control deck. Playing along with like Snapcaster Mages and Tassigurs and Tarmogoyfs. I'd love to see that deck come together, and this was a card that I was very excited to see when it was first printed. Very, very cool. Next up, we've got the Ingenious Infiltrator. 2 blue-black, Vidalcan Ninja, uncommon, 2/3 with Ninjutsu for a blue and a black, so you do the swap thing. And whenever a ninja you control deals damage to a player, draw a card. So turning your ninjas, or your shapeshifters for that matter, into Ophidians is just awesome. This is a great engine for the blue-black deck, and a very, very, potent reason, again, to not leave those ninjas unblocked, or anything from a blue-black deck unblocked, just because of what can possibly happen if this, or God forbid, the Fallen Shinobi comes out and takes you out like that. Ninjas are awesome. Ninjas are cool. Next up, we have Kaya's Guile. 1 white-black instant at rare. Choose 2. Each opponent sacrifices a creature. Exile all cards from each opponent's graveyard. Create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying, or you gain 4 life, and you can entwine it and get all 4 by paying an additional 3 generic mana. So There will usually always be a combination of modes in a game of limited where this becomes relevant. More than likely, it's going to be the sacrifice option, the spirit option, and maybe gaining 4 life occasionally. But you will find some combination of modes when you do cast this to extract some amount of value. And a card that's this flexible is definitely a powerful one and one to keep an eye out for. It's a solid 2.5 for me. Very cool stuff. And does have a little bit of modern implication as well, maybe like an Esper control deck. Creature sacrifice, each opponent, and that does get around things like Leyline of Sanctity as well. So this is a good KO against Bogles, and then nuking someone's graveyard to wipe out something like Hogak and Dredgevine, or any of the other Dredge decks, that would really take advantage of this. Powerful stuff here. Powerful stuff. Next up, we have got a card that I'm super excited to see reprinted. This is Kes Dissident Mage. For a 1 blue, black, and a red, you get a legendary creature, human wizard, mythic rare, 3/4 flying, and during each of your turns, you may cast an instant or sorcery from your graveyard. If a card is cast this way, I would put it in your graveyard, exile it instead. So, mana cost aside, she's relatively easy to splash as long as you're in part of that color combination. There's ways of getting to the mana, I think, in this format. Kes is incredibly powerful here, and even just a couple of spells that are in your deck, and you most likely, if you're going to be in a blue-black or a blue-red or, black-red, maybe not black-red, but you're going to have a good number of spells in your deck, and you will benefit from being able to cast those again with Kes. Very, very powerful effect here. Gave her a B for the build around me, 2.75 once it all comes together, and in Modern, I've already seen some lists popping up for Grixis mid-range list, a bit like Jund, where you're less heavy on things like Cryptic Command, and you're a little bit more heavy on hand disruption like Thought Seizes and Rise Falls, and just general removal there. Very cool stuff indeed. Just Kes is a powerful card, but that mana cost is the only thing holding her back for limited play, but she's still very powerful. Next up, we have Lava Belly Sliver. 1 red-white creature sliver at uncommon, 2/2. Creatures you control have, when this creature enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to target creature or target player or planeswalker, and you gain 1 life. Now, along with the Wing Shredder Sliver, this thing is an absolute kill on sight out of red-white decks that will most likely be comprised of mostly slivers and changelings, which are also slivers. Kill this on sight, because if the game goes long enough and you're not putting up much defense or resistance, this will kill you very, very quickly. Very scary card. Solid 3 for me. Next up, we have got the Lightning Skelemental. What a wild name, and this art is just absolutely wild as well. For a red, or 2 red and a black, you get a creature elemental skeleton at rare, 6/1. Lord almighty. With trample and haste, and whenever Lightning Skelemental deals damage to a player, that player deals or discards 2 cards. At the end of the end step, sacrifice Lightning Skelemental. So this is a fusion of Blightning, which was a 3 damage burn spell that made you discard 2 cards, and also Ball Lightning, which is typically a 6/1 that has trample haste and does the sack clause here. This card's really powerful, and psychotic art aside and the weird mana cost, this is a great one-time shot that's going to hit your opponent on 2 different axes. If you get it down early enough, it's a ton of damage and cards that they're losing. Very, very powerful stuff here. It's a solid 2.25 for me. The only thing, like I said, is that awkward mana cost. The double red is just, it's a little goofy, but it's probably not insurmountable. For Modern play, I can see this being potentially good in some sort of red-black burn variant. Maybe, who knows? Something with like Blightnings and Bump of the Nights and things of that nature. You don't always need a Lightning Helix, but maybe you do. I don't know. Next up, we've got Munitions Expert. For a red and a black, get a Goblin that's uncommon. It's a 1/1 with Flash. That's weird. And whenever it enters the battlefield, you may have it deal damage to target creature or planeswalker equal to the number of goblins you control. With a surplus of changelings and goblins, of which there are many in black and red, this is a really powerful removal spell. I don't quite understand why this doesn't hit players. It might have been too good when it had that originally, especially since it does have Flash. And there are, a good decent number of token generators in this set that this might have just gotten completely out of control out of the uncommon spot. So they're still very powerful here. It definitely needs a lot of support to go with it, but once you do have it, it's a very powerful, solid 2.25 for me. Next up, we've got Nature's Chant. 1 in a hybrid green-white instant at common, destroys target artifact or enchantment. Why this wasn't just naturalized? Well, it can't be because this doesn't print any new or print any already existing modern cards. So I guess they just made it be this, and this card is fine. It's a sideboard card. Bring it when you need it. Don't mainboard it. Moving on. Next up, we have Reap the Past, a X red-green sorcery at rare. Return X cards at random from your graveyard to your hand, and then exile Reap the Past. With enough mana, this becomes a very powerful, potent card into the late game. Pulls a lot of weight. I leave it up to you to determine how to randomly determine what cards are being pulled back. If your graveyard is, let's say, more than 10, that could be fun. Frank Carson put a fun article on channelfireball.com that wrote out a bunch of fun different ways for all you mathematicians out there. Interesting stuff here. It's a solid 2 for me. I don't know, like what is the threshold of mana that you need to hit before this, captures enough cards in your graveyard to do something relevant. I don't know. Potentially powerful, but, I'm not super enthusiastic about it. Next up, we've got the Rot Widow Pack. 2 black-green, creature spider with reach. You can pay 3, a black and a green, to exile creature from your graveyard, and you create a 1/2 green spider creature token with reach, and then each opponent loses 1 life for each spider you control. So this is the Ishkana Blight Widow thing? The Undergrowth creature from Guilds of Ravnica from the Golgari. Anyway. Yeah, this is a really powerful card here. I think this is probably one of the better creatures for limited, just because you do have things just constantly going to the graveyard. Green black wants to do that very often, and the activation cost is a bit steep, but it can be done at instant speed, which is nice. And it really does have, good synergy as well with those green creatures that want to have a creature entering the battlefield consistently. So this is a pretty powerful card here. I'll give it a 2.5. And like I said, this is definitely one of the more powerful gold cards, especially for limited, where creatures are just constantly dying. Next up, we've got Ruination Rioter. Green-red human berserker, uncommon 2/2 that reads, whenever it dies, you may have it deal damage to any target equal to the number of land cards in your graveyard. So you probably won't be doing anything too crazy with this. You can kill, I would say, maybe some X3s at best. Beyond that, you've probably lost a ton of lands to your graveyard. But going to the face is also quite strong as well, and this, your opponent will be incentivized if this comes down in the late game to probably not block it if you do have your graveyard set up so that it would be like, maybe like a lava axe to the face for, in some cases. But this is a pretty powerful card here. It does take some build around me to get it going. It's a solid 2.25, and I think in Modern there's some good play for this with cycling lands and fetches to actually play this in some sort of like a Naya Zoo deck. Would be pretty cool there. And next up, we've got the Soul Herder. It's one of the cards we looked at the very beginning of spoiler season for Modern Horizons. This is a 1 blue-white spirit uncommon 1/1. Whenever a creature is exiled from the battlefield, but a +1/+1 counter on Soul Herder, at the beginning of your end step, you may exile target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So if you've stolen something, it's going to give it back, unfortunately. But you're in blue-white, so how did you steal it? Anyway, so this thing is actually pretty powerful here. It takes a couple of turns to get going, but resetting all of the ETBs that you will have in your deck, there's the changeling that makes another changeling when it comes into play. Yeah, there's just a ton of creatures that are in this format that have a good ETB effect, especially in blue and white. And resetting those is always going to be powerful and limited. So this is a 2.5 for me, and I can see this maybe playing a little bit into blue-white or Bant Spirits in Modern, although their ETB effects do need to be timed pretty specifically, though. Things like Rattle Chains do need to be played at a specific time to blank removal spells. So I'm not sure if this will make it in that deck, but it does have some potential there. Next up, we have got Thundering Djinn. 3 blue-red, 3/4 Djinn, add uncommon with flying. Whenever it attacks, it deals damage to any target equal to the number of cards you've drawn this turn. It strikes like a bolt from a brainstorm. Ugh, best flavor text ever. So sick. Yeah, so good text aside, it's obviously good for a point of damage at minimum, but when you are in this blue-red deck, there are a ton of ways to be drawing extra cards during your turn. So I could see this thing hitting for like 2 or 3 in some cases, and left unchecked, you know, you could easily mow down an entire board state and then just start clocking your opponent for a lot of damage. It sucks that it's 5 mana, but I think any cheaper than that, and this thing becomes quite oppressive and limited. So 2.75 for me, high mana cost aside, very powerful card indeed. Next up, we've got the Unsettled Mariner, a blue and a white for a shapeshifter at rare, 2/2 with changeling, so it's all creature types. And whenever you or a permanent you control becomes a target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter that spell or ability unless its controller pays 1. So this tax isn't huge, but it will make the difference at key points during the game. You know, they draw the removal spell they needed at that turn, and it's now 1 more mana to cast it. So pretty powerful stuff here. 2 mana 2/2s again have always been good and limited, and obviously in Modern this becomes even better as you add it to Spirits and Humans decks. Cool stuff. Next up, we have got Wrenn and 6, our last Planeswalker of the set. So Wrenn and 6, it's a red and a green legendary Planeswalker. Wrenn, I guess 6 is the tree? I don't know which one's which. Anyway, 3 starting loyalty, you can +1 to return 1 target land from your graveyard to your hand, -1 to have it deal 1 damage to any target, and -7, you get an emblem with instants and sorcery cards in your graveyard have Retrace. Now, Retrace allows you to cast the spell again by paying its mana cost and discarding a card as an additional cost to cast. This comes down fairly early in the game. If this comes down on turn 2, you're going to be able to plus it pretty much without any interference. The only downside to him or them is that you do need a lot of support for this to be relevant, so you do need some cycling lands. It just kind of sucks, you know, without those, you can obviously continue plussing just without any effect, and then get to that emblem, you know, hopefully, and then start casting all of your spells again after you've cast them again. Yeah, there's some power here, but it definitely is in a singular direction. You know, it's great to see Planeswalkers that are very sort of, you know, single-minded in what they do instead of the old template of just +1, draw a card, minus something, kill something, -7, game-ending effect. There's some variation here, and I do like that. So Wrenn and 6 is a definite build around me, but I do think that once you have the deck in place around it, it's a very powerful card and a solid 2.5 for me. And I do hope that with the cycling lands coming into Modern and being able to get back fetch lands as well, does give Wrenn and 6 a good chance to show up into Modern. All right, moving right along to Colorless. There's only one. This is Morophon, the Boundless. 7 generic mana, legendary creature, shapeshifter, mythic rare, changeling, so it has all creature types. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type, and spells of the chosen type you cast, spells of the chosen type you cast cost white, blue, black, red, green, less to cast. This effect reduces only the amount of colored mana that you pay. Other creatures you control the chosen type get +1/+1. Aside from the sliver thing, this thing is pretty underwhelming, unfortunately. Being 7 mana, it's unlikely the cost reduction will ever come into play. Even the Anthem effect isn't all that great. I gave it a 1. You know, this is one of those things where you take it, if you want it for like EDH, obviously, which is where a lot of these cards will show up, of course. Pick 1, pack 1 it, put it under your packs, and then start your draft again on pick 2. So it's a cool card, obviously. It's neat to see that there's so much support for all these different kinds of tribes now, but pretty underwhelming beyond that. And let's go on to some actual cards. with our artifacts, we're going to kick things off with Altar of Dementia, a card that I'm very excited to be able to open finally for Modern. And just own it, because these things were pretty expensive for a while. 2 generic mana gets you an artifact at rare, sacrifice a creature, and target player puts a number of cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power from the top of their library into their graveyard. So milling here. There is a fair amount of Graveyard's energy in this set that you can take advantage of. Green-black can definitely abuse this, with the Rot Widow pack especially, can do some stuff with this card. So don't throw this into any deck, obviously. I can see that if you have enough big creatures, that sacrificing all of them to the altar at some point in the game will just mill your opponent out. Pretty cool. And of course, in Modern, blue-black mill players are salivating over this to be able to slam Consuming Aberration and just go ham with it. So keep on keeping on, you plucky mill players. Good stuff. It's a build around me for a limited format, obviously. Next up, we have the Amorphous Axe. 2 generic mana, artifact equipment, common, gives the equipped creature +3/+0 and is all creature types, and it equips for 3. I'm going to say this 2 more times in this set review. I don't like equipment in Limited. Yeah. The changeling aspect does give us a little bit of play, however little it does. And the power bonus is pretty underwhelming as well. This is a 5 mana investment to do anything, and there's better things to do. Just better things to do. Moving on. Arkham's Astrolabe. This is a single snow mana. It's weird to say. Snow artifact at common. It can be paid with any 1 mana from a snow permanent. So your snow lands generate the mana for this thing. As it enters battlefield, you draw a card, and you can pay 1 and tap it to add 1 mana of any color. So this is Prismatic Omen. No, Prismatic Lens? Yeah, the one that does this without any snow mana, obviously. Needing snow mana is the only thing that's keeping this back from being, I think, a pretty solid player in most decks. This would enable a lot more 3-color decks, I think, if you wanted to go that route, or at least a decent splash card as well. But cycling and fixing of any color will make it important for the decks that can actually cast this, consistently. If you can play this on turn 1 off a snow-colored land, that's pretty powerful stuff. But you do need the deck to really push this thing even further. In Modern, there's already decks I've been seeing that are snow scred control decks, and I'm all about that. That's really cool. But for Limited, this is a 1.75 for me. Again, that snow mana cost to cast it is really rough. Next up, we've got the Birthing Boughs, 3 generic mana artifact uncommon that you can pay for and tap it to create a 2/2 colorless creature token, shapeshifter token, with changeling. So you just pop out lots of changelings. This is a significant investment to get anything out of this. It's 7 mana to get that 2/2. But in a long drawn out game, the bow will eventually break on your opponent, and you throw in any type of synergy, and this card becomes a pretty solid army in a can. Being able to activate it whenever you want to is a big plus to this thing. So 2.25 for me. Pretty cool card. Next up, we have got the Farmstead? Yeah, Farmstead Gleaner. 3 generic mana for an artifact creature Scarecrow at uncommon. It's a 2/2 that doesn't untap during your untap step. And you can pay 2 generic mana and untap it. That's right, the untap mechanic returns once in this set. That's an old mechanic from the Lorwyn Shadowmoor blocks, if you're, nostalgic. You pay 2 mana to untap it, and then untap it, and put a +1/+1 counter on Farmstead Gleaner. This is a pretty solid body, but you're going to invest a ton of mana over the course of the game. Now, obviously, once it gets to the mid to late game, the 2 mana might be pretty inconsequential to tap with, so at that point, it's pretty good. But until that point, it's just a 1.75 for me. It's cool, but it takes some work to get there. Next up, we've got the Fountain of Ichor. 3 generic mana for an artifact at common. Taps to add any color of any mana, or one mana of any color. And you can pay 3 to make it turn into a 3/3 dinosaur artifact creature until the end of turn. I haven't found the reason for it to be a dinosaur other than flavor reasons alone. And apparently that Sun Empire on Exxon were digging for something, and they found this, so Cool. Yeah, this is it's kind of funny when you look at this. You know, like I think of all those budget EDH players that I know who like swear by their manoliths, saw this and just went shh and sleeved this up instead. Yeah, so it's decently costed for a fixer. It can be a threat in a pinch. If you do need to splash, this is a good way to do it. But beyond that, it's pretty normal. It's a solid 2 though. Solid 2. Next up, we have the Ice Hide Golem. A single snow mana gets you a snow artifact creature golem, uncommon. It's a 2/2. That's pretty underwhelming. 1 mana 2/2s are typically quite strong. You know, Goblin Guide, quite a strong card. But this is pretty useless without those snow lands. And again, I honestly can't say how many that you're going to get during a draft. You know, I think back to when Battle for Zendikar came out, and they first revealed the colorless waste mana. And there were a decent number of cards in that set that required you to cast with waste mana, and some of them even, you know, said you get +1/+1 for each waste you control, and those were randomized into the packs. And so, you know, but there were plenty of lands that generated the colorless mana that you would need to cast those spells or activate the abilities. And in this set, you know, there aren't enough, I don't think, you know, unless the basic lands in the pack really do support this archetype, which I'm very suspect of. So I need to see it in action, honestly. That you know, range aside, it's a 1.75 for me. You know, 1 mana 2/2s are outclassed very quickly in this format, I think. And you can just do a whole lot better than having to go out of your way to expend picks on lands to enable a 2/2. So anyway, next up we have the Lesser Masticore. Masticore, not a Manticore, Masticore. 2 generic mana, artifact creature, Masticore, uncommon, 2/2. As an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card. You can pay 4 mana to deal 1 damage to target creature, and it has Persist. When this creature dies, if it had no -1/-1 counters on it, return to the battlefield under its owner's control with a -1/-1 counter on it. So this is a really cool design that synergizes well with the cards that need graveyard fodder, be it lands for like Scale Golem or some of the green-black ones that want creatures in the graveyard. And it being a 2 mana 2/2 is certainly fine as well, and I do like that it has a little bit of extra utility with that ping ability on there as well. So I guess a 2.25. I might be overrating it a little bit, but I still think this is quite a powerful card for Limited. Next up, we've got a card that I'm so underwhelmed with. I think they finally did it. They made a bad Mox. This is Mox Tantalite. Artifact Mythic Rare, suspends for 3, and you pay 0 to do that. So we've already seen some suspend cards, so you pay 0, exile with 3 time counters on it, take off at the beginning of your upkeep, and when the last one is removed, you cast the spell without paying its mana cost, and it taps to add 1 mana of any color. Hitting this on turn 1 is obviously the dream. Obviously. This is a bad top deck late in the game, and I'm very suspect of any game that comes down to, oh, if I just had 1 more mana, I would have gotten there. You know, they are out there, but it's just so few and far between. I honestly think that Wizards has finally made a bad Mox. And Mox Amber has some play in Standard right now. Has a little bit of modern play in those weird legendary decks as well. But this one, I think, unless, I mean, you have things like, what's the enchantment that lets you play it? Spells for free. I'm blanking on it now all of a sudden. It'll come to me later, obviously. But unless you can cheat this into play automatically, this is a really rough card to play. Very, very underwhelming, but maybe there's something here. Next up, we've got Scrapyard Recombiner, yes. 3 generic mana for an artifact creature construct, 0/0 at rare. Modular 2, the only existence of modular in this set. This creature enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. When it dies, you may put its +1/+1 counters on target artifact creature, and you can tap it and sacrifice an artifact and search your library for a construct card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle your library. So I'm honest about this. I had to look up to make sure that construct was a creature type for changelings. And it is. It's obvious that it is, but I just had to make absolutely sure. Something about the artifact interaction, being an artifact here, just kind of threw me off a little bit. So that aside, it is highly unlikely that you'll have another target to put those modular counters on. And if you're playing other artifacts, what the hell were you doing? Like, this card is not good. I gave it a 1. There might be some really weird corner case scenario where this thing is actually playable, but I can't think of it. Better for Modern, obviously, in Artifact decks, but anyway, moving on. Next up, we've got the Sword of Sinew and Steel. That's right, we've got more swords. We're up to 7 now? Yeah, 7 swords. 7 swords, I think. This one is a 3 generic mana for an artifact equipment at Mythic Rare. The equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from black and red. And whenever a equipped creature deals common damage to a player, destroy up to 1 target planeswalker and up to 1 target artifact. Equips for 2. Now, I will say this again. I do not like equipment in Limited. Even this one's bad. A freaking sword. Like, all of the swords are mind-bogglingly powerful. Like, Sword of Light and Shadow has been the weakest of all of them up until this point. So, like, Body of Mind was insane. War and Peace is insane. Feast and Famine's insane. Fire and Ice, insane. These cards are insane, and this has got to be the weakest and probably the most embarrassing abilities I could put on this thing. I don't understand why this card, like, it doesn't do anything in Limited. Like, if you're playing against a red-black deck, sideboard it in, and then it's okay. But off the top of my head, this is what this thing could do instead. The red part could be lightning bolts or a shock. Yeah, I get they already did it on Fire and Ice. Shut up. The black one could have been, I don't know, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. You know, do something. You know, God, the sword sucks. Next up, we have the Sword of Truth and Justice. 3 generic mana for an artifact equipment at Mythic Rare. Gives +2/+2 and has protection from blue and white. Whenever a equipped creature deals common damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control and then proliferate. You choose any number of permanents and or players, and then give each another counter of each kind already there. So, poison counters, ++ counters, -— counters, loyalty counters, experience counters, filibuster counters for you Ravnica fans. This one is actually playable in Limited. I still don't like equipment, like I've already said for the 3rd time now. But this one actually does something when you hit with it. And that's what a sword should do. It should not be this conditional, if they have something in play, it does something. No, I'm sorry. Like, these are mythic rare equipment. These swords come from who knows where, and they all do something absurd. They come from Mirrodin. They all do something absurdly powerful, and they all should do something on impact. The red-black one is just an embarrassment, honestly. I'm super mad. Like, that's what they went with, but whatever. Oh, yeah. Truth and Justice, 2.5. Good card. Next up, we get to the Talismans of Whatevers. These are all the enemy colors, so red, white, red, blue, green, blue, white, black, and green, black. They all cost for 2 generic mana. They're uncommons. They tap for a colorless mana, or they tap for 1 color of their identity and deal 1 damage to you. They're good for your splash, and not much else. Even if I were in, let's say, a green-black deck, I probably would not play one of these unless I really needed some amount of ramp, which it's not that much ramp, honestly. So I give all these a 2. You know, they're playable, but when you absolutely need them. And next up, we've got our last artifact. We have the Universal Automaton. 1 generic mana for an artifact creature, shapeshifter, common 1/1, is a changeling. And in order to play this, you would be really scraping the bottom of the barrel for playables here. It's 1.25. The fact that it has changeling is the only thing that saves it from being any worse. All right, last section. Here we go. Let's do it. Buckle in, boys and girls. We're on to the lands, and this one's actually pretty easy. The Cycle lands, white, blue, black, red, green. They all come into play tapped. They tap for a color of their identity, so Baron Moor is black. You get the idea. And you can pay you can pay the color of their mana to discard it and draw a card. Cycling it, they are all playable. Make your land drops cycle when needed. Play them in your colors, obviously. My only thought is, come on, Astral Drift in Modern. Yep, that's all I got there. Solid 2s all around. Next up, we have the Cave of Temptation. This is a land that it's a common, taps for generic mana, or you can pay 1 and tap it, add 1 mana of any color, or you can pay 4 and tap it, sacrifice Cave of Temptation, and put 2+1/+1 counters on target creature. Activate this ability only at any time you can cast a sorcery. Why? Was this so powerful at instant speed that you had to make this restriction on it? At least it's Shimmering Grotto with upside. I'm guilty of playing Shimmering Grotto in Standard at one point in my life. I needed it for a green splash in my Grixis deck for Ancient Grudge. There, I admitted it. But yeah, this card is basically unplayable. It's a 1.5 for me. I don't like cards like this at all. Next up, we have the Horizon lands of the enemy colors. We have the red-blue, the red-white, the green-black, the green-blue, and the black-white one. They all do the exact same thing. So Fiery Islet, Islet, and I'll note the other ones as we go along. They're all rare lands that you can pay a life and tap it to add a single color of one of their identities, or you can pay 1 and sacrifice it and draw a card. These are all playable. They are all playable. I give them all 2.25s. Even if you're in only half of that color identity, this is still playable as a land of that color because it has the best 2 words of magic, draw a card on it. Also in Modern, you can see these being played in green-black mid-range. Storm will probably play these. Blue Moon will play this as well. Death and Taxes. These are all going to go great in those decks because we've already seen the power of Horizon Canopy, so these can only be just as good. There's Forgotten Cave, more cycling lands, moving right along to Frostwalk Bastion. This is a snow land. It's uncommon. It taps to add a generic mana, but in this case it would be snow generic mana. Pretty cool. You can pay 1 and a snow mana until end of turn. Frostwalk Bastion becomes a 2/3 construct artifact creature. It's still a land, and whenever it deals combat damage to a creature, tap that creature, and it doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So this thing's pretty underwhelming, and it gets small bonus points from me for being a snow land if you need those. But a 2/3. Bastions are supposed to be pretty big. I looked up just how big a bastion is, and some of them are upwards of 20 feet tall. So I don't think that a 2/3 is quite indicative of a bastion's size. Just a thought. It's a 2. Boring card. Next up, we have Hall of Heliod's Generosity, a legendary land at rare, adds generic mana, and you can pay 1 and a white and tap it to put target enchantment card from your graveyard on top of your library. So this is Academy Ruins for enchantments. Pretty cool. Now I had to go back and do a quick enchantment count. There are 21 in this set, of about which 10 are playable, which means that you should probably not play this card. Pretty simple stuff. In Modern, I can see Bogles playing this in some number to get back their Daybreak Coronets. It's a nice little utility land, and it's a cool little flavor piece from Theros, obviously. We have Lonely Sandbar for more cycling, Nurturing Peatland for more Horizon lands. We've got a card that I'm super excited about, Prismatic Vista. This is a rare land. You tap and pay 1 life and sacrifice it. Search your library for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So when I first saw this, I kind of laughed that it's a rare because it's literally just an untapped version of Evolving Wilds or Terramorphic Expanse. But this is still a super playable card. If I have a Splash Unlimited, I will absolutely go for this. You know, to get that 1 basic swamp I need for like Dead of Winter in my snow deck. There's some flexibility there. In Modern, the implications for this are even greater because you can play this in Blue Moon, Blue-White Control, Storm, Green-Black Midrange. Any 2-color deck that doesn't, maybe even some 3-color decks too, but any 2-color deck primarily that doesn't want to shell out for, OG fetch lands and pay $100 for a Scalding Tarn or pay like the $30 that Flooded Strands are worth now. This is an awesome, awesome card and something that Modern desperately needed in terms of a pseudo reprint. Gave this one a solid 2. Very, very cool stuff. Then we've got Secluded Steep, Silent Clearing, Sunbaked Canyon. They do what they do. You've already heard about them. And we wrap up with Tranquil Thicket and Waterlogged Grove. They all do their things. And then we've got our Snow-Covered Plains, which I actually have to review, the Snow-Covered whatevers, because they are super important if you're in the snow deck. Please, please leave them in your draft. or you will ruin someone's day. Yeah, they're all 2.25s just because they are that important to making those cards work. Again, I have no idea how many of these you'll actually get in the draft if you're in that deck. Hopefully nobody at your table is being a jerk and taking them because they're valuable. Like, come on, people. They're freaking lands. Freaking lands. And that's it. We're done. 1.5 hours later. I thank you so much for hanging out with me, guys. Much appreciated. For all of the Modern Horizons review here, I hope you have gotten some value out of this, be it some modern cards that you weren't quite sure about, some strategies and tips for your pre-release season work. That was last week now, geez. For your drafts, your sealed events, your Magic Online drafts. Really, really excited to play this set. Somewhere within it's somewhere within 15 miles of my apartment. My box is on its way right now. I've been getting updates all morning from UPS or USPS. It's somewhere close, and it should be here tomorrow, I think, maybe today. Who knows? But we're going to open that on camera. It's going to be super exciting, so be on the lookout for that. You're going to see me just tearing boosters open, which is always fun. Yeah, so again, thank you very much for watching, guys. Be sure to comment down below in the video what your favorite cards are for Modern, what are you most excited to play with in Limited, what Modern decks are you going to be putting these cards into, is there a new archetype that you want to build with this? Let's get that dialogue going, and yeah, we'll be back later this week with more EOT News Flash of regular episodes. Core 2020 set spoilers start tomorrow, so we'll have plenty to talk about there, and then what else the hell happens. So thanks for watching, guys. Have a great afternoon.